Come join us now for the Public Square from the American Policy Roundtable. I'm Wayne Shepard here with Dave Zanotti and Jeff Sanders, Melanie Elsey, Rob Walgate, and Alan C. Duncan. And Dave, you're calling this program what?
Lies from the Other Side.
Okay.
We talked recently about how the entire country now, whether we like it or not, every state has to deal with the question of what the Supreme Court did in overturning Roe versus Wade, and how we are going to go together, thinking together, living together in consent of the governed on the question of abortion. Okay. Nobody wants that kind of heavy lifting. We'd all like to get on with our lives. Recognize that for most people, the question of abortion does not impact their life on a daily basis. I get that. It's not to say that the question isn't important. Of course it is. But it's not something that most people wake up every morning and go to sleep every night thinking about it. But there are people who do that, mostly people that are in the abortion industry. That involves both people that provide abortion, people that consult for abortion, people that provide the drugs for which is actually, the drug is actually called RU46. It's been given a lot of other more neutral names since that time, but now half of all abortions provided in this country are done in the chemical process, which is in of itself a whole nother story.
Wow.
And if you've ever watched the movie Unplanned, about the story of Abby Johnson, you'll understand that part. And I would urge you, if you've never seen the film Unplanned, please make it a first time view. Now, it's not as horrible as you might think it is. It's done tastefully, but it has graphic moments, and it is deeply troubling, and it's real. That's the reason it's troubling, is because it's real. Now, in working all of this together for years, and going through the entire Dobbs decision and going through the responses after Dobbs, and now getting involved state by state by state in this attempt now to enshrine abortion into state constitutions. After the federal government told us through the Supreme Court it's not in the federal Constitution, now everyone suddenly say, oh, let's put it in the state Constitution. Not let's find it there, let's put it there. Well, when you start trying to create a human right, you're really on sketchy territory. Because when's the last time somebody held a course and said, here's how you create a human right? Take out your paper, take out your pencil, and here are the fundamental principles. That's not even the American way of thinking about rights. In America, our rights come from God. Or some people aren't comfortable with that terminology. They say from nature or nature's God. In either case, they're inherent rights. We don't invent them. But now we're inventing them. And we're inventing them, and guess who's writing the language to invent them?
The people that are protected.
Yeah.
The organizations that are protected.
The abortion industry.
That's who's writing yes.
How do they get a pass?
Because they either have enough friends in the legislature that will carry their water for them to put these on the ballot, or in initiative states like Ohio, they were able to go out and get enough signatures to write their own language, get people to sign it, and then put it on the ballot. So they have access like everybody else if they have enough friends in powerful places.
Can you imagine all the other industries that are going to take a cue from that, like the gambling industry, big pharma?
The gambling industry's been doing that. Yeah, listen, this is a big problem. We're about going back to Teddy Roosevelt and the Gilded Era. I mean, yeah, this is, so big business is now writing their own past. Used to be they wrote the past into laws. Now they're writing their past into the Constitution.
Nice.
Now, why is that significant? It's not trivial. The reason it's significant is because all the other laws have to conform to constitutional law. They're going for the final prize to have that kind of standing. Now, in the process, there's not a lot of transparency. And there's been some very serious lies being told. So I want to talk about some of those today. And you know what? This is going to get uncomfortable. But we've got to talk about it. The first is the fact that Planned Parenthood is attempting, in the Ohio Amendment, to write their business plan into the state constitution. Okay? We've all got seethelanguage.com. If you like to follow along, just right now, punch in your phone, seethelanguage.com. How cool is that? Across the whole world listening to this broadcast right now, you can literally follow along right with us. Just punch in seethelanguage.com.
And I think when you take a look at that website and you take a look at the language that's being proposed in Ohio, you're able to take a look at the strategy plan. It's in essence the plan that Planned Parenthood and others put in. So it's their survival mechanism. If they get that, they're in forever.
Well, where's the proof? Okay. The proof, of course, this has not been disclosed. Do you know that in the state of Ohio, we have been petitioning the lawyer that represents the people that brought this to the ballot? asking that attorney to tell us, please disclose who wrote the actual language of this amendment, and they won't tell anybody? Can you imagine you're writing an amendment to the Constitution establishing a whole new human right, and no one has the right to know who wrote it?
I guess they want to hide something.
How does that work?
Why would they want to do that? I don't know.
People know we're putting our names on it. We're standing up and saying we think this is bad language, and people know who we are.
I talked to a major senior journalist in the state of Ohio recently about this, and that person said, well, it's just like all the other ones in all the other states. I said, what? I said, we've charted all the ones. As Melanie Elsey created a graph and a chart, literally charting all the language of the other attempts to do this. There is nothing as radical as this one. I mean, we're talking about senior journalists that are just buying hook, line, and sinker what Planned Parenthood's saying in the press.
You know, I think of the Declaration of Independence, which talked about human rights and listed them, and it has 56 signers at the bottom. They weren't trying to hide anything. They just put it right out there in front of everybody. What are these people trying to hide?
So here's what the language actually says. Every individual has a right to make and carry out one's own reproductive decisions. That's the right, by the way, one's own reproductive decisions, including but not limited to decisions on contraception, fertility treatment, continuing one's own pregnancy, miscarriage care, and abortion. Now, we looked at that and said, wow, if you're trying to enshrine the right of abortion, why don't you just write a language that says abortion is now a human right in the state of Ohio and can't be contested? If that's what you want, you could say it in one sentence. There it is. Ta-da. Because you're putting it in the Bill of Rights. Everything there is usually a sentence or two. Instead, you've got all these provisions, 232 words, and abortion's only mentioned 3 times. And in that list of those 5 things, abortion's is basically, they buried the lead. Abortion is 5 on the list. Now, we could get into all kinds of places about this language where it's clear that these are decisions, but not limited to. So if there's 1 through 5, that means there's obviously space for 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Who knows how many reproductive decisions are going to end up under this rights proviso?
Limited only by human creativity.
But the point is, why these 4? We get abortion. Why are the other 4 there? And we've sat around this table and we've asked and pondered and wondered and researched. And finally, Wayne, we found it.
Well, really?
Page 29 on Planned Parenthood Federation International, the National Planned Parenthood Organization, publishes on page 29 of their 2022 annual report called Relentless. It's titled Relentless.
Oh, okay.
Page 29, you will find all 5 of these kinds of services outlined in Planned Parenthood's business model for the services that they provide and for the way that they receive grant money from state and federal governments to cover the costs of these kinds of services.
So they want the Constitution to protect their business plan.
It's even more, it's worse than that, Wayne, because when you have the language, but not limited to, the other items that are included in their annual report go well beyond this list of 5.
But within the context of reproductive freedoms.
Exactly, the gender-affirming care, the whole 9 yards. But when you talk about the language further down in the text of the proposed amendment where it talks about not discriminating against, they want to make sure they're not discriminated against when it comes to funding.
Okay.
And let me tell you how true that is.
Right on.
All right. In 2016, the Ohio General Assembly, the legislature in Ohio, defunded Planned Parenthood from being able to get state and federal grant money under the control of the state legislature because they didn't want to give money to anyone that promoted or provided abortions. So they defunded Planned Parenthood. Now, it only cost Planned Parenthood in Ohio, that's 22 clinics in Ohio, it only cost them $600,000 that year. All right, so it wasn't like it was billions of dollars for the state, but it was for the state of Ohio Planned Parenthood groups. All right, and other abortion providers that might have been involved. Okay, well, Planned Parenthood sued. I'll guarantee you that the litigation cost them more than $600,000. All right, they sued in federal court. And they sued the whole way up to the appellate court, the Sixth Circuit, and they lost. The federal judges said, no, the legislature has the right to control that funding, and you don't get it. Do you know that if this amendment passes, Planned Parenthood in Ohio could go right back and apply for all those grants again? And if the state attempted to enforce the law that says that the legislature passed, a court will strike it down immediately because it's discriminating against them. Now their business plan's in the Constitution, and you can't prohibit them as an entity that's carrying out these rights. It's a perfect plan.
How could you even regulate them?
Oh, man.
What if you found that Planned Parenthood was doing something that was not good for women? I mean, I think they're always doing something not good for women, but what if everyone agreed they were doing something not good for women?
Yeah.
They were unsanitary. They were health code violations. How do you even police them at all?
Well, you'd have to hope that the courts would look at other forms of law and see that those other forms of law did not violate the language of this. And you'd hope for the best. First off, you'd hope that they wouldn't get to that spot, but you'd hope for the best. But again, Alan, the point that you make is maybe not.
It's at least a fight. Yeah.
Because they have constitutional authority that nobody else has.
And aren't we seeing an example of that in the state of Ohio when it comes to statutory law and constitutional law colliding?
Yeah, you've got it right now in this the collision between the legislature passing a reformation of the state school board, and now people are suing the legislative act because the state school boards actually got authority in the Constitution. It exists independent of the legislature in constitutional authority. So now the courts are having to literally play out this very, very situation. So there you go. Now, is it a lie? Well, I'll tell you one thing, it's sure not disclosed.
Yeah. We mentioned earlier seethelanguage.com. I wanted to get that out there one more time. Seethelanguage.com. Look it up and take advantage of the insight there. You know, I used to write job descriptions in a corporate environment, and I was always taught to one final point in the job description was other duties as assigned. So, in other words, anything I haven't thought of yet is your responsibility. That's kind of what's going on here legally in this language, isn't it?
You got it.
We'll be back. That's the halfway point of today's Public Square, but join us for the second half coming up.
We will be right back for more on the Public Square.
If you're a regular listener to the Public Square, you've heard of the release of the new book, Jesus, His Story. The response has been remarkable. Why the excitement? This is a sample of what readers are saying. Arranging the four Gospels into chronological order put the life of Jesus into perspective. Thank you. One told us, after reading Jesus' story, I knew this would make a great graduation gift for my nephew. Another said, I got my copy of Jesus' story and read it over the weekend. I want to order 6 more. Can't wait to give them to my friends and family. Interested? You can call us at 1-800-522-8683 or order online. Take a fresh look at the greatest story ever told, Jesus, His Story, at thepublicsquare.com.
Spreading the light of liberty across the land. Now back to the Public Square.
Lies from the Other Side, our topic today on the Public Square. Always glad to have you listening. And by the way, you know by now we have a website where you can listen to this program as well. It's called the Public Square. Take advantage of that. Dave?
Wayne, I'm uncomfortable with the title. It sounds very strongly judgmental. But when someone is telling an untruth and running major television commercials with it, what do?
Well, and we're uncomfortable with it, but we've asked them to defend what we're saying. So it's not like we're just out there throwing accusations. We're out there asking them, hey, who wrote this? Can we have a conversation about it? Because we have some questions. Not only is the American Policy Roundtable, but we know a number of Ohioans that have questions and just would like to know what you think, but not limited to means.
Well, let's talk about one of the commercials that's recently come out. And it's a brilliant commercial because it bespeaks one of the hard cases that actually happened where a couple in Ohio who dearly want to have children and dearly wanted the child that they conceived lost their child in a very difficult and extremely rare circumstance, a fetal syndrome that affects 1 out of 15,000 pregnancies.
Sad and tragic story.
Sad and tragic story. Okay, so that goes without saying. And everyone around this room has been touched by lost pregnancies. All right, so it's a tragic story now, and it has the right to be told. The question is it being told truthfully? Now, their stories become a part of a political campaign. And the ads in the campaign are basically saying that the government in the state of Ohio took away both the protection and the right to get care of a woman who will remain unnamed. If you do the online research, you can't escape finding these people, but we will not in any way try to do anything to disparage their story in any way, shape, or form. They're a couple, and they are Ohio residents. And what happened to them is that they were in an emergency crisis situation on healthcare. They were in an emergency pregnancy. The form of the fetal syndrome that's involved here inevitably meant the death of the unborn child, period. There's no doubt, and everyone knows that. It also could have meant serious physical harm to the woman the longer she attempted to carry the pregnancy and even put the potential of her dying. So this is that one case scenario when we talk about the life of the mother, the life and the health of the mother. Okay, so Planned Parenthood put together this commercial using their story, basically saying that the government took away this couple's rights to the health care that they needed, and they had to leave the state and go out of state to get care because Ohio's abortion laws are broken. And the only way to fix that is to pass this constitutional amendment called Issue 1, because this could happen to anybody. Well, number one, it could happen to anybody, but it happens to 1 in 15,000 pregnancies. So it's not going to happen to everybody. So that's a little bit of the tweak there. That's a little bit, that's a commercial, okay. That's the small point. The big point is this. The state of Ohio laws at the time, this just happened a year ago, at the time this incident happened, the state of Ohio laws did not prohibit that abortion to save the life and health of the mother. It did not. There was not a broken law that forced her to carry that pregnancy to term. Those laws are still on the books today. They have been on the books for years and generations in Ohio. Ohio has always protected the life and health of the mother, and this is a clear case. You can read into it and learn it yourself. Secondly, they claimed that they couldn't get insurance because it was illegal in Ohio because this person was a state employee for the state insurance policies to pay for what's called a therapeutic abortion. Well, we've examined all the policies that were in force for state employees at that time. The provision was there. The law didn't prohibit it, and the insurance was there waiting to be used. Now, what happened was somebody in the process, and again, now this couple has to be understood. They are in the most horrible trauma you can imagine. They're losing a child. It's as bad as it gets. No one holds them at harm. Someone in their medical team called to try to get the insurance placement put correctly to get this process started, and they were told it's not covered. Now, that happens every day on all kinds of medical stuff, especially when you got a case in 1 out of 15,000 pregnancies. What are the likelihood that there's experts on hand waiting to take that call? Somebody messed up. All that the doctor would have had to do was to pick up the phone and call the Ohio Department of Insurance and check on that state policy, and they would have known that the insurance was available. The law didn't prohibit the procedure, and the insurance was available. The state of Ohio took nothing away from them. The laws that they needed and the provisions that they had were made. It was not broken. What was broken was some pattern of the communication. Something went wrong, and that couple couldn't fight for themselves. So you know who they turned to? Planned Parenthood. You know what Planned Parenthood did? They put him in a car. They took him to Pittsburgh. She got the care that she needed over 2 days. Planned Parenthood paid for most of it and brought them back. They started a GoFundMe campaign, and they raised $15,000 to cover the other incidental expenses that they would have had. And they received that money, and then they became advocates for Planned Parenthood on Issue 1. But the story that's on the television, while the tragedy is real, the loss is real, the story of the broken laws of Ohio is not true.
Wow.
And you know, I can't find a reporter anywhere that is willing to cover this story because they're afraid of the criticism they'll get for criticizing a couple that went through a tragedy. No one's criticizing the couple. They're the victims, and they're victims twice.
Yeah, my heart breaks for the couple. It does, and my heart also breaks because everything you just explained, it feels like people are being exploited and used. No one wants to see anyone go through the tragedy that family went through. That's heartbreaking in every aspect of it. No one's trying to prevent people from getting the care that's needed in those situations. But when you see the 30-second commercials that are going to play on emotions, that's heartbreaking and tragic. We understand. But the fact is, just like the title of the show, everything's not being true.
1 in 15,000 is the number. And we are taking serious risks by talking about this out loud and by sending this radio broadcast out across the country and to all of the friends that listen to the Public Square. Somebody has got to talk about this.
Dave, the other deception behind this, the whole use of this commercial with this couple, is that they're portraying it as if it is core to the text of the proposed amendment. The text
Only issue 1 can fix this.
Only issue 1 can fix this.
That's the line.
And even in some of the news reporting, the comments that because of this circumstance, abortion should be available to any woman at any time. The actual amendment is light years beyond this rare example. When it says not limited to, that's anything for any age child without parental consent, anything with regard to the woman's health and safety, everything's in play. All of the things that we have said, birth to conception to live birth, everything in between there is in play. So for the proponents of issue 1 to use a very rare example as if it's the core is in itself a deception.
It's in the lawmaking. We're all involved in public policy heaven for lifetimes. When do you ever write a law to the exception?
Right.
That's why you write laws. But this isn't a law. This is an amendment to the Constitution, and that's the fundamental problem in all of this. You're using the most authoritative, singular language, the vehicle of the state constitution, that judges are obligated to uphold. It doesn't matter. The legislature can't pass laws that veto a constitutional amendment. Can't do it. Right? The judges of the state Supreme Court in Ohio have to abide by this language. But this language is so vague that this proposal belongs in a statute. It belongs in a legislative body, debated out, passed, and then people can attempt to repeal it. They can attempt to initiate a statute. But this belongs in statutory law because there are so many instances of examples that you need lots of laws to make this work, not just 232 words.
Well, when I look at it, it says, but not limited to. I was having a conversation with someone the other day, and I said, it lists 5, but not limited to. We can't think about 4 months from now or 8 months from now. You need to think about 60 years from now because it's not limited to then.
And before someone criticizes Dave for saying this belongs in statutory law, what he's trying to say, I think, is this belongs in the conversation before the legislature to debate what would go into statute. We would not want this in statutory law.
No, this debate belongs in the legislature.
In the legislature,
and
correct.
These provisions need to be worked out. And this problem can. Now, here's the great irony of it all. Thank you, Melanie. The great irony of it is this. They say issue 1 alone can fix the problem. Well, obviously, we know that the tragedy could not have been undone. The problem they're speaking of is the care that the woman was given. But under the statutory system of Ohio laws right now that Planned Parenthood despises, this case that they're advertising, this was handled. Couldn't make the tragedy go away, but the care was available. You can't tell me for 1 second that the Ohio State University hospitals or the University hospitals in Cleveland or the Cleveland Clinic could not have provided the same care that UPMC did in Pittsburgh. What happened was Planned Parenthood, according to records that are published, assigned an abortion navigator for this family, and they took it from there and did it their way. Now, all of us are being asked to forfeit our Constitution in the name of that experience, and that it's the only way to solve the broken laws. Problem is, the laws weren't broken. Wayne, it's interesting. Sometimes people criticize the idea of thoughts and prayers, and they think it's a careless dismissal. The people of Ohio had already made provision, not just for this couple, but for any couple that would face a similar, unique, rare tragedy like this. The insurance policies are in place through the state of Ohio. The people of Ohio pay for the work of the state of Ohio. And the people of Ohio pay for the state employees. The people of Ohio created a law that says the life and health of the mother has to be protected. The people of Ohio do care. They have laws that would have worked had they been, now people fall down. We get it. People mess up all the time. But it's not that the people don't care. It's not that the laws are broken. And it's not they're just throwing prayers up for a tragedy. They were ready to answer the call. The call never came.
Wow. Well, thank you for such a clear explanation today of what the other side is trying to tell us. And in conclusion, let me just say, and I'm sure all of you join me in this sentiment, that we pray for that family that you described in that television commercial. We need to pray for them in their pain. All right. Thanks for listening to The Public Square today, and thanks for your support of the American Policy Roundtable.
The Public Square is a broadcast service of the American Policy Roundtable.